Mr. Henry Gunn stepped into his 65th year with an unshakable belief that he was still the goldenrod in everyone's eyes. After decades working in the civil service, he was used to admiring glances, used to the feeling that every meeting had someone taking note of every word he said. Yet, just after his retirement day, his phone fell silent. No more ringing incessantly. No one waiting for him to approve an important document anymore. In the quiet morning, he sat in his house, staring at the wall adorned with medals, feeling an odd emptiness in his heart. He sighed. Turns out retirement is just like being stored away in an archive. Mrs. Linda, Henry's wife, was a sharp and perceptive woman. Throughout their marriage, she had always been the one working behind the scenes, silently managing everything so her husband could shine in public. But she was far from a submissive type. For Linda, loving her husband did not mean being blind. She noticed every small change in Henry's habits, and just a single frown could tell her exactly what he was thinking. If he's up to something shady, I'll know just by looking into his eyes, Linda often reminded herself. After Henry retired, their family life experienced some disruption. Henry suddenly had a lot of free time, while Linda remained busy with women's clubs and charity work. Henry started browsing the internet, reading tabloid news, reconnecting with old friends, and sometimes he seemed to be searching for something that made him feel still valuable. Men are like that. At this age, they still want to prove they're in shape, Linda said with a half smile, though a trace of worry lingered in her heart. One day Henry received an invitation to attend a senior health seminar. The topic sounded grand. Recharging energy, stay young and live long with universal energy. His eyes lit up. All his life he had relied on logic, but now words like universe, energy, and rejuvenation suddenly became extremely appealing. Maybe I can learn how to stay healthy and meet friends my age, Henry said excitedly to Linda. She just shrugged. If you like, go. But don't fall for those silly energy tricks. The seminar hall was packed, mostly with silver-haired gentlemen and elegantly dressed ladies. Henry, in a neatly tailored suit and red tie, felt as if he had returned to his civil servant days. But his mind was quickly captivated when a young, sharp-looking woman stepped onto the stage. This was Nancy Energy, introducing herself as a spiritual energy therapy expert and America's top feng shui advisor. Her voice was smooth as silk, and her gaze seemed hypnotic. Ladies and gentlemen, our bodies age because energy becomes blocked. But by opening the energy channels and activating the bioenergy field, we can live 20 more years while remaining as youthful as 40. The audience gasped and applauded. Henry felt as if he were drinking honey. Nancy even knew how to call out a few VIP guests in the audience, making everyone feel noticed. When she approached Henry's row, her smile was dazzling. You look so dashing. I can feel the strong energy within you. Just a small adjustment, and you'll be healthier and younger immediately. Henry felt mesmerized. It had been a long time since any woman, other than Linda, had complimented him with such alluring charm. In fact, Nancy Energy was not an unfamiliar name to those who had heard rumors about spiritual school scams. She was notorious for both extracting money and making middle-aged men fall hopelessly in love. Linda's friends had whispered among themselves, if that girl gets involved with a man, he'll lose both his wallet and his heart. But Henry had no idea. In his eyes, Nancy was a kindred spirit, appearing at just the right moment, when he felt useless, craving recognition. After the seminar, Nancy invited Henry to a private energy therapy session to measure his energy. Of course, the appointment came with a friendly fee of a few $100s. A small investment to unlock your destiny, Nancy said sweetly. Henry didn't hesitate to pay. feeling the amount was nothing compared to the promise of rejuvenating his vitality. He left the hall with Nancy's business card in his jacket pocket, whistling as he walked, a habit whenever he felt excited. Linda didn't put much faith in these universal energy tricks. That evening, when Henry recounted the story, she only gave a faint smile. Whatever they say, you'll believe it. Retirement makes people too eager for fun. But Linda didn't know that, from that very moment, Nancy Energy had planted a dangerous seed in her husband's mind, both admiration and the feeling of being pursued, which he hadn't felt in a long time. The next day, Henry prepared his clothes meticulously, as if he were going to meet a high-ranking superior, then headed to his private appointment with Nancy. She didn't just talk about spirituality. She skillfully asked about his past, his career, praising him for being intelligent and having a leadership aura. Henry felt ecstatic, completely unaware that this was just a ploy to extract information and gradually take his money. Nancy even subtly mentioned other big shots who had sought her advice and were now prospering in business, enjoying robust health. Henry returned home, looking at himself in the mirror, his face flushed with excitement rather than good health. He began to believe that Nancy possessed the secret to immortality. Linda noticed that her husband had started dressing more elegantly, smiling to himself frequently, and paying more attention to his grey hair than before. Something isn't right, she thought, though she had no idea what was about to unfold. Henry, on the other hand, thought simply, "I'm just learning how to take care of my health, Linda. Don't worry." Wives are always suspicious. Little did he know, the path he was about to take was not just an energy therapy course, but a cunning love and money trap carefully set by Nancy Energy, aimed squarely at recently retired men craving admiration. After the energy therapy session with Nancy, Henry Gunn seemed transformed, but not in the way Nancy had promised, rejuvenated by 10 years, but rather mysteriously changed in a way that made him 10 times more peculiar. He began spending strangely, gemstone bracelets for accumulating energy, feng shui spheres the size of watermelons, and talismans plastered all over his study to adjust the positive chi. Linda, who had always managed finances strictly, could not remain silent when she saw credit card statements showing repeated charges of $499, $899, amounts not insignificant. "What on earth are you buying that's so strange?" Linda asked gently one evening during dinner. Just things to help me sleep better." "You wouldn't understand," Henry replied curtly, chewing while avoiding his wife's gaze. Linda raised an eyebrow. "A $500 energy bracelet for sleep. Why not just have a glass of milk?" Henry suddenly snapped in an unusual outburst. "Women, you're always suspicious. I have money, I'll spend it. I don't need anyone's permission." It was the first time Linda had seen her husband lose his temper over a small question. Her instincts, honed over years, whispered, "Something's going on." But Linda was not the type to make a scene. She quietly observed, and with her sharp eye, she noticed Henry paying excessive attention to his appearance. He lingered in front of the mirror longer, even bought a type of cologne he had never used since their wedding. One day, Linda saw him doing push-ups in the living room, sweating profusely, yet still trying to appear nonchalant. One morning, while Henry was showering, Linda happened to see his phone vibrate. A message appeared on the screen. "Today's energy adjustment session is very important. Don't forget to bring the purple stone, Mr. Henry, looking so dashing. Nancy." Linda felt her blood boil. "Dashing?" She gritted her teeth. Is he going on a date with this Nancy now? That evening, Linda did not immediately confront her husband. She decided to play the role of the innocent wife, observing closely. Credit card bills continued to rise. Seminar fees, private therapy fees, and even luxurious meals at restaurants Henry had previously complained were too expensive. Clearly, he was spending money on someone, and Linda suspected it was the dashing Nancy herself. Henry trusted Nancy absolutely. In his eyes, she was not only beautiful, but also worldly wise, attentive to stories about his glorious past that Linda had grown tired of hearing. Nancy skillfully complimented Henry with phrases like, "You still radiate leadership, and you have a rare masculine energy." For a man in the twilight of life, being praised for his masculinity was even more thrilling than a raise. Henry was hooked, increasingly infatuated with his private meetings with Nancy. Of course, they came with fees, but he believed it was an investment in health and vitality. Linda immediately understood that this was no simple feng shui scam. Nancy was clearly the kind of woman who knew how to make men weak. Linda needed a plan, but she couldn't act alone. One afternoon, Linda arranged to meet her longtime friend, Mrs. Martha, a once famous investigative journalist. In the quiet cafe, Linda recounted all the unusual signs regarding Henry. After listening, Martha just laughed. "Oh my, your husband has probably fallen for that Nancy energy. I've heard of her. She specializes in hunting middle-aged men with money and pride. She just gave a speech at that health seminar, and the press has long suspected she's running a disguised pyramid scheme." Linda frowned. "So what do you think we should do?" Martha took a sip of her coffee, her eyes lighting up with the journalist's gleam. "If you want to expose her, you have to do it systematically. We need to track, collect evidence. Trust me, confronting her directly won't work. Men completely infatuated with a beautiful woman are immune to reason. You have to be strategic." The two women leaned close, whispering and outlining each step, following Henry's appointments, recording receipts, even posing as clients to see what tricks Nancy employed. Martha had old contacts in journalism and law, ready to help if needed. "We'll establish a proper family investigation team," Martha said slyly. "Sounds much fancier than just jealous wife." Linda chuckled, but inside, her resolve had never been stronger. The next day, Linda began testing Henry. She gently asked, "You've been going out a lot lately. Where have you been?" Henry mumbled, "Those health seminars." "I need to learn how to live longer with you, don't I?" Linda smiled softly. "Oh, really? Then why do you always come home smelling of Chanel? Or have the seminars started featuring beautiful models now?" Henry jumped, forcing a smile. "You're talking nonsense. They're just helping me adjust my energy." Linda thought to herself, Energy in the wallet, I bet." That evening, Linda quietly recorded all the unusual expenses. She called Martha, reporting, "Target is already heavily trapped." Martha replied immediately, "Prepare for phase 2. Tomorrow I'll take you to see Speaker Nancy Energy in action. You'll see the scam with your own eyes." And so the plan was set in motion. The two women decided to establish the Gunn family investigation team, with a slogan that was both humorous and cutting: "Rescue Henry, defeat Nancy." Linda felt her blood boil, not just from jealousy, but from the insult. "I can't allow a fraudster to treat my husband like an ATM." While Linda prepared in secret, Henry remained immersed in the universal energy trance. He believed that just a few more therapy sessions would fill him with the vigor of youth. Each time he met Nancy, she skillfully suggested a new product: quartz stones to regulate blood pressure, protective talismans against petty enemies, even a yang energy enhancement regimen for longevity. The names alone sounded expensive. Henry didn't suspect a thing. As long as Nancy smiled and said, "You are wonderful," he would immediately reach for his wallet. Linda knew she had to act quickly. Otherwise, The family's savings would soon be drained by useless universal energy items, not to mention the risk of Henry becoming entangled emotionally. And she swore to herself, "This Nancy will be exposed. No one is allowed to make my husband a fool except me." Linda Gunn was used to running a household like managing a small business. Everything needed a plan, organization, personnel, and this time, an investigative target. Thus, the Gunn family investigation team was officially formed with 3 core members: Linda, Chief Commander, Martha, Strategic Advisor, and David, the 26-year-old son, temporarily unemployed computer engineer, but more than experienced in hacking the neighbor's Wi-Fi password. Linda held a meeting right in the living room, her tone as serious as the FBI. "We must collect enough evidence of Henry meeting Nancy, where, what they do, how much he spends. We need photos, recordings, receipts, all of it. The goal is to catch him red-handed so he cannot deny anything." David grimaced. "Mum, this sounds like a crime movie. I'm just afraid if Dad finds out, I'm done for." Martha laughed. "Don't worry. Men who are infatuated are usually blind. You just play the role of a client and see how Nancy sells her universal energy packages." The strategy was clearly divided. Linda would play the role of a housewife, interested in spirituality, finding ways to approach Nancy at seminars. David would pose as a potential client to extract information about expensive therapy packages. Martha would handle intelligence, tracking Henry, recording his appointments, contacting a few old friends to verify if Nancy had any criminal history. To strengthen their team, Martha also recruited an off-the-books agent, Mr. Walter, a retired elderly neighbor who enjoyed photographing birds in his garden. The catch was, his camera didn't just aim at birds, it was also excellent at aiming through the neighbor's windows. "Walter's a bit nosy," Martha whispered, "but on the plus side, his eyes are sharp. If Nancy and Henry secretly meet at a cafe, he'll capture every detail, even the coffee brand." On the first day of surveillance, Linda wore a long purple spiritual nun dress, carried a giant beaded handbag, and attended the seminar where Nancy was speaking. As soon as she arrived, Nancy greeted her warmly. "Hello. Are you here to learn how to rejuvenate your energy?" Linda pretended to be naive, her voice sweet as sugar. "Yes, I heard you help many people become younger. I want to learn so I can keep my husband, hey hey." Nancy laughed charmingly and replied immediately, "Oh dear, women must love themselves first. I'll help you become a woman radiating positive energy, so much that your husband will automatically return and kneel before you." Linda thought to herself, kneel, because the wallet's empty, right? While Linda played the role of an obedient student, David posed as a young businessman looking to enhance his vitality. He deliberately acted clueless, asking Nancy about a special regimen for men. Nancy promised to arrange a personal consultation, of course with a special premium fee, $1,200 per session. David recorded the entire conversation, sending it straight to his mother and Martha on the spot. Meanwhile, Mr. Walter also put his talents to work. One afternoon, when Henry took the excuse of going golfing with friends, Walter accidentally, or perhaps deliberately, captured a series of photos of Henry and Nancy sitting close together in a high-end cafe. Henry looked tense, while Nancy smiled like a flower, her hand lightly resting on his arm. A level of intimacy that even a 20-year married couple rarely displayed in public. "The photos are so clear, you can see Nancy ordering a sugar-free cappuccino," Walter boasted. Linda looked at them, half angry, half amused. For a rookie, he's effective. Martha, with her investigative journalist instincts, discovered that Nancy wasn't targeting only Henry. She scoured several middle-aged entrepreneur forums and found at least 3 other men who had been energy advised by Nancy. and all had lost thousands of dollars on feng shui stones, talismans, and energy elevation courses. One man even complained that Nancy promised affection, then disappeared along with the deposit for moving in together. See, Martha pounded the table. This woman is no joke. She scams both hearts and money, like a pyramid scheme with a romantic twist. If we don't act, Henry will be the next victim, voluntarily handing over his wallet. Linda gritted her teeth. He won't lose another cent. We need concrete evidence. Catch Henry with Nancy red-handed. Only then will he wake up. The Gunn family investigation team operated like an action movie, but with laughs. Linda pretended to be obsessed with spirituality, even burning incense at home at night to channel energy, almost making Henry believe she too had been enchanted by Nancy. David played the client so convincingly that Nancy almost scheduled a private yang energy assessment for him. Mr. Walter was so focused on surveillance that he neglected photographing birds, only hunting the energy couple as they exited upscale bars. One evening, the team held a secret meeting, spreading all the photos, recordings, and receipts across the table. Linda looked at the evidence of Henry dining with Nancy, even signing an $800 bill for just 2 salads and a bottle of wine. The universal energy is as expensive as a NASA rocket launch. David laughed. If Dad knew I'd snuck photos, he'd kick me out. Martha reassured him. Don't worry. Once he comes to his senses, he'll thank us. Men are usually ashamed when deceived, but even more ashamed if no one rescues them in time. The next step. Gather more evidence that Nancy had scammed others, so when the truth came out, Henry would not only see his wife was right, but also realize he wasn't the only victim. Martha contacted an old friend at a news office, ready to publish an investigative article if needed. Linda felt this battle was no longer just about jealousy. It was about protecting her family and their dignity. At the end of the meeting, Linda said firmly, "We have enough evidence to act, but we must choose the right moment, when Henry is most deeply enchanted and Nancy is at her peak scam. Only then will we strike. He must see and hear for himself that his goddess of energy is nothing but a fraud." Martha nodded. And trust me, Nancy won't just lose Henry. She'll lose her entire lucrative network of male victims. In the following days, Henry Gunn looked like a man high-voltage energized. He returned home in an unusually elated mood, murmuring strange phrases: vibrational frequency, chakra activation, welcoming prosperity. Linda only needed a glance to know another private consultation with Nancy Energy. Nancy no longer stopped at cheap feng shui stones. She began crafting elaborate energy cleansing rituals with astronomical fees. One evening, as Henry dabbed on his vitality rejuvenation perfume and hummed softly, Linda gently asked, "Henry, have you been using a new perfume lately? It smells unusual." Henry jumped, quickly hiding the bottle of essential oil. Nancy said. My friend recommended this one for dispelling negative energy." Linda smiled softly, asking no further questions, making Henry even more flustered. She was playing the psychological game, pretending to trust her husband so that Henry would reveal his own weaknesses. Meanwhile, Nancy escalated the honeyed words. She promised Henry that with just the final ritual, he could fully open his flow of prosperity, helping him maintain strong social influence even after retirement. Of course, this ritual required a hefty offering fee, exactly the same amount Linda had just saved to repair the roof, $50,000. Henry's eyes went wide, yet he nodded mechanically. Linda quietly informed Martha and David. Her son immediately came up with a story. "Dad, today I met a financial lawyer. He said there are many spiritual scams, just like Nancy's. First they sell stones, then they demand ceremonies costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Henry frowned, slightly flustered. That can't be. Nancy is so worldly. She even talks about history, philosophy. David smirked. Dad, even scams now require philosophy lessons. You think a con artist would be ignorant? The warning planted a seed of doubt in Henry. But Nancy was no amateur. She cast her love spell through passionate messages and compliments, making Henry feel 30 again. You are a man of true strength, born with leadership aura. Rare is anyone like you. Henry blushed like a teenage boy reading the words. Linda watched her husband hug his phone and smile to himself, thinking quietly, this spell is stronger than any tonic for the kidneys. Linda decided it was time for the final move. Let Henry reveal the entire plan himself. She suddenly acted gentle, showing interest in all her husband's hobbies, cooking his favourite dishes, praising his charm, even saying, "Darling, if I had the money, I'd want to do the energy cleansing ritual with you. I guess I'm too old. I can't keep up with you anymore." Henry was deeply moved, flustered. "Oh no, you're still wonderful. But if we do it together, that would be great. But the fee is a bit high." Linda tilted her head, pretending to be casual. "How high?" Henry stammered. It's not too much. About $50,000, but in return, I'll rejuvenate my energy, opening the way to luck for the whole family. That was all Linda needed. She immediately texted Martha and David. Time to strike. The family investigation team prepared the trap. Linda would allow Henry to transfer the money, but demanded to meet Nancy in person to thank her. Martha contacted a journalist friend, ready with a hidden camera. David was on standby to hack Henry's phone if needed to track the exact appointment. The fateful day arrived. Nancy chose a luxurious hotel for the private ceremony. Henry eagerly prepared the check, while Linda lightly held her husband's arm. "I want to go with you, to welcome the new energy together." Henry turned pale. This is a private ceremony. Not really appropriate." Linda smiled. "Then I'll wait in the lobby, and afterward we can have dinner together." Henry reluctantly nodded, unaware that Linda and Martha had set up 2 cameras and a hidden recorder. Mr. Walter was also on watch outside, his telephoto lens like a sniper rifle. Nancy appeared dazzling, wearing a white robe trimmed with gold, holding a sparkling prayer bead. She glanced at Linda sitting in the distance, her eyes showing a flicker of concern, but quickly masked with a professional smile. "Hello, Mr. Henry. Today we will perform the grandest ritual. Did you bring the check?" Henry nodded, placing the envelope on the table. Nancy began her ornate speech about the universe opening energy gates, cleansing karmic obstacles. But at that moment, Linda casually approached, pretending surprise. "Oh, this must be the famous Nancy. How lucky. I wanted to see the ritual firsthand." Nancy was startled, and Henry broke into a sweat. Linda still smiled softly, but her eyes were sharp as a knife. "Go ahead, let's see who's really skilled." The plan to expose Nancy energy had been meticulously mapped out by the family investigation team, like a detective movie script, except the main actors were a retired official and his lion-hearted wife. Linda acted as commander-in-chief, David handled technical matters, and Martha took on the role of the unexpected femme fatale. First, Linda quietly withdrew part of their savings as bait. To make Nancy think Henry was genuinely ready to pay the fee, she allowed her husband to prepare the check. Meanwhile, Martha arranged a private meeting with Nancy, posing as a wealthy heiress from a Texas gold mine, seeking a spiritual expert to guide her. Martha donned a fiery red dress, dark sunglasses, and carried a bag large enough to fit a poodle. The moment she entered the hotel, She radiated the aura of a boss who spends money like water. Nancy immediately fell into the trap. Within 15 minutes of conversation, she was enthusiastically describing the million energy ritual at a fee double that of Henry's, $100,000. Martha recorded the entire conversation, while David operated a hidden camera sewn into her shirt, capturing close-ups of Nancy boasting about her conquests. Meanwhile, Linda orchestrated the scene so that Henry would lead her to the final ritual, which was actually a fancy dinner at a high-end restaurant chosen by Nancy to sign the energy transfer check. Linda pretended not to suspect anything, but in reality, the team had already set up 2 mini cameras on the neighbouring table, and Mr. Walter sat poised in the corner with a long lens, as if ready to photograph an eagle. The dinner began smoothly. Nancy, still with her enchanting smile and syrupy sweet voice, said, "Mr. Henry, today the universe's energy gates are exceptionally open. If you sign now, everything will go smoothly." Henry fidgeted and glanced at Linda. His wife smiled angelically, but a cold flash gleamed in her eyes. Just as Nancy reached for the envelope, Martha appeared from the next table, pretending it was a coincidental encounter. She smiled brightly. "Oh, Nancy energy, isn't it? You just scheduled a meeting with me this afternoon, remember? The $100,000 ritual?" The entire restaurant fell silent for a moment. Nancy's face went pale, sweat beading her forehead. Henry stared at his wife, then at Nancy, stammering, "What? The $100,000 ritual? You tricked me." Linda calmly pulled out her phone, opening the audio file of Nancy enthusiastically pitching to Martha. "Any wealthy old man, I activate their energy completely." The sound echoed through the upscale restaurant, drawing the attention of nearby diners. Nancy tried to argue. "They set me up. I only help people cleanse their energy." David immediately displayed photos taken by Mr. Walter. Nancy with her arms around a string of middle-aged male clients, including Henry, a dentist, and a car garage owner. The restaurant began murmuring, some diners even taking out their phones to record. Henry blushed, initially trying to defend. "Surely, it's a misunderstanding. Nancy is very kind." Linda neither shouted nor cried, just looked straight at her husband, her voice calm yet sharp. "How much more money do you need to lose before you wake up?" It was like a slap in the face. Henry fell silent. When Martha added a copy of the $100,000 ritual contract Nancy had promised, he completely collapsed. All the sweet illusions crumbled. Nancy was just a professional con artist, preying on vain, wealthy husbands. Seeing the situation turn against her, Nancy tried to flee, but the restaurant security blocked her because Linda had alerted them in advance. At that moment, an elderly diner stood up and applauded, and, "Brilliant! This is a Hollywood script in real life, exposing scammers right at the dinner table." The entire restaurant applauded, whistles and laughter mixing together. Nancy's face turned crimson as she raged, but it was useless. All the evidence had been collected. Henry bowed his head in shame, mumbling apologies to his wife and children. "I was so foolish. I let sweet words blind me." Linda sighed. "Luckily, we got to you in time. Money can be earned back, but this family's honor cannot be sold." The family investigation team had completed their mission. Nancy was escorted out of the restaurant to the sound of hearty applause. Henry felt both embarrassed and relieved. Embarrassed for being deceived. Relieved to have escaped before losing everything. After the dramatic unmasking of Nancy energy at the restaurant, Henry Gunn's life suddenly seemed to switch into lockdown mode. The next morning, Linda emptied her husband's wallet, sealing both credit cards and checkbook, handing them over to David for safekeeping. Henry looked at his empty wallet and sighed like a schoolboy whose toys had been confiscated. The real shock was not losing tens of thousands of dollars, the amount sufficient to buy a vintage car he had long dreamed of, but the blow to his pride. The rumour Mr. Henry was tricked by a spiritual mistress spread like a virus among the retirees' circle. Old friends called, part concerned, part chuckling. One even joked, "Hey Henry, heard you just recharged your energy." "Does it come with a warranty?" Henry could only swallow his anger and sulk around the house. Linda was genuinely upset, but she didn't yell or make a scene, as Henry feared. Instead, she applied a special reform method. Every morning, Henry had to write a page of voluntary self-reflection, like, "Today I promise not to believe sweet words. Today I promise not to sign checks for strangers." Linda also posted reminder notes around the house. Don't let energy make your wallet disappear. Financial difficulties soon became apparent. Family savings had diminished considerably, the roof repair had to be postponed, and David's travel plans were temporarily put on hold. Yet, during this time, the family grew closer. In the evenings, instead of secretly texting, Henry shared meals with the family, laughing about the mission of catching the mistress. David teased his father. "Dad, you're living proof of the saying, 'Men never age, they just need someone to tempt them.'" Henry ruffled his son's head but grinned crookedly. "When you're as old as me, you'll understand." Henry truly started to come to his senses when Linda made him join a volunteer group for seniors, where he had to guide others on preventing spiritual scams. The first time he stood before the crowd, telling the story of how he himself had been deceived, he blushed bright red. But seeing the seniors listen attentively and nod in agreement, he admitted, "Well, I almost bought an energy stone. I nearly signed a land deed for a feng shui master." Henry realized he was not alone in his folly, and when he saw the seniors thank him for the warning, he felt a lightness, as if partly redeeming his mistakes. Linda quietly stood at the back of the hall, watching her husband grip the microphone with a trembling voice, thinking, "At least he knows how to make amends." The family was no longer financially comfortable, but the atmosphere was warmer. Linda was no longer angry. She switched to loving supervision. Whenever Henry lingered too long on his phone, she would ask, "Who's sending you energy wishes now?" The whole family laughed, and Henry waved his hands. "Enough. I'm done with the word energy." David also learned a valuable lesson. No matter the age, people can still be gullible when flattered. He decided to spend more time with family, less glued to social media. After seeing his father deceived, no one could claim immunity to such tricks. Henry, once a vain man craving praise for youthfulness, had now become cautious and attentive. He even joked, "Linda, from now on, you're the only energy expert I need." Nancy energy collapsed as quickly as a balloon popped by a pin. After the public unmasking at the restaurant, former victims who had been cleansed or paid for luck rituals came forward in droves. The lawyer David had mentioned previously got involved for real. Some reported losing money to protective amulets, others to sacred water purification. Even a widowed beer lover admitted being scammed for both money and his waist measurements for a miracle slimming belt. Authorities didn't let her get away. Nancy was investigated for financial fraud, with a multitude of calls and messages she had sent to clients presented as evidence. Her fake spiritual empire dissolved like a sponge in water. Meanwhile, the Gunn household felt relieved of a burden. Linda no longer had to run a family investigation team or monitor every step of her husband. David could return to his studies and work, no longer posing as a client to trap scammers. Henry, well, no need to mention, he became as quiet as a clipped cat. His once oversized pride now fit neatly in his breast pocket. Every time Linda glanced at him, he became obedient as a puppy. But Linda wasn't the type of wife to walk away after victory. She knew Henry was foolish, but still a loving husband and father. Instead of scolding, she used empathy to reform him. In the mornings, Henry voluntarily brewed coffee for her. In the evenings, he proactively washed dishes, a sight never seen in their 30-year marriage. Occasionally, Linda would teasingly ask, "Hey, do you feel low on energy?" Henry would jump, "No, plenty of energy, just short on cash." The family's atmosphere gradually returned to normal, but warmer than before. Henry became genuinely humble, valuing love and family strength. He joined volunteer activities, often recounting his story as a valuable lesson to warn others. Every time he told it, people laughed. But Henry no longer felt embarrassed. He said, "I'd rather be the joke than let someone else lose money like I did." One beautiful afternoon, Henry decided to do something romantic for Linda, a gesture he had long forgotten amid years of busyness. He bought a bouquet of bright red roses, proudly bringing them home. But Linda, seeing the flowers, furrowed her brow. "Let me see the receipt." "What receipt?" Henry blinked. "Just to check there's no word energy on it. Don't want her selling spiritual roses." The whole family burst into laughter. Henry had no choice but to hand over the real receipt, proving the flowers were from a regular supermarket, not love-activating roses. Linda hugged the bouquet, amused yet teasing. "All right, I'll let you off this time. But remember, flowers only, no charms." In the end, the Gunn family not only regained happiness, but also learned a harsh lesson. Do not let pride and illusions blind you. Do not trust promises of eternal youth or supercharged energy. Most importantly, family is the best shield against any trap. Now, whenever someone mentions positive energy, Henry immediately waves his hand. "Sorry, I leave the energy to my wife."